Hey there, welcome to the Self-Worth Renaissance podcast. This is your host, Kirsten Van Wingerden. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Washington State. Please note that what is about to be discussed in this episode is not a replacement for individual therapy and is a collection of musings and thoughts on mental health topics. So welcome back to the Self-Worth Renaissance, the podcast where we rediscover our worth, embrace our imperfections, and step into the most empowered version of ourselves. I'm Kirsten Van Wingerden, your host and licensed mental health counselor, here to guide you through your journey towards self-love and confidence. So today we're going to talk about a little bit more of a woo-woo topic, which is the topic of intuition. And I did an episode on intuition a while back, and it did really well. And I thought that I would talk about it more today, talking about the types of intuition that there are in further depth, discussing what intuition feels like in the body. I'm going to share some personal experiences just to kind of give some examples of what intuition can feel like and what that can look like. And we're going to talk about how to lean into that intuitive sense. You know, intuition is that deep inner knowing. It's like an invisible compass. It guides you through life. And it's often described as a gut feeling, a quiet whisper, or a sudden insight that doesn't come from logical reasoning, but feels undeniably true. So let's break it down in a way that feels practical and accessible today. Because the truth is that we all have intuition, and oftentimes we live lives that are so busy that we can't even pay attention to that intuition. We don't even know that it's there. And we start to live lives that don't really align with who we actually are. And we're so focused on just getting from point A to point B that we don't pay attention to that like gut instinct. So first of all, what even is intuition? So intuition is the brain's ability to process information quickly and unconsciously. And intuition actually draws from past experiences, emotions, and subconscious cues. So it's like your mind is running in the background and it's picking up on patterns and signals that your conscious brain really hasn't fully registered yet. So, you know, intuition is like, yeah, it's kind of like woo-woo, oh my gosh, like your nervous system is interacting with mine and all these things, right? And it's also like scientific, which is kind of cool. So, you know, the science behind it is that your brain processes millions of bits of information every second, but you're only really consciously aware of a small fraction of that. So intuition works by recognizing patterns in the background and sending signals to your conscious mind. For example, I went over to someone's house once and I saw their fence and I was like, I just know that my dog is going to find a way out of this. And I kind of ignored that gut feeling. I didn't. I actually was like a little anxious mess because of it. And I just had that knowledge that okay, my dog could get out of this situation, which by the way, he did, but he's okay. He's safe and sound now. It's all good. Some kind people helped him. But I actually had that knowledge because it was a pattern that I knew, because I had another friend that watched my dog and my dog got out of that fence and I wasn't there. And so I had that knowledge. I had the knowledge of watching him jump over fences that were really tall. However, he did not jump over the fence that time. And I also had learned experience where he will run if he gets scared. And I had experienced that with him before. So I had this intuitive sense when I saw this yard. I was like, I think he's going to get out of it. And it was intuition because even though I couldn't see any escape pathways for him, I just had this gut feeling, and my gut feeling was right. And, you know, I was so anxious because I wasn't listening to that and checking on that and seeing where that was coming from. I didn't know how to communicate that clearly. And so, you know, that's just one example of how intuition can be learned from patterns or behaviors in the past. And then, there's also that gut brain connection, which plays a really big role, which is your enteric nervous system, often called the second brain, which sends signals that influence decision making. And that enteric system, that's your gut microbiome, that's like the muscles, all the things that kind of tell you if you're anxious or not, actually. It's pretty cool. And studies show that intuition is often just as accurate as logical reasoning. So, if you are someone that is driven on logic, here you go. There is evidence that it works. So, it really, when we think about people that are like experts in their field or are like geniuses, they often have really strong intuition and really strong pattern recognition. And it's kind of a beautiful thing when you think about it. And, another thing intuition is, it's a marriage of implicit knowledge, which is acquired through experience without realization, like learning to ride a bike or learning to walk. Energetic sensitivity, which is heightened awareness of others' emotions and experiences. And some non-local intuition, which is knowing about the future without past experiences. So there is intuition we have that isn't based off of pattern recognition. And we can get into that more on a different episode probably. But let's go ahead and just break it down into the 6 types of intuition that you might experience. So the first type of intuition we're going to talk about is physical intuition, which is gut instinct. It's felt in the body as a physical sensation, either tightness in the chest, butterflies, chills, or a sinking feeling. And it's often linked to survival instincts. So your body knows before your mind actually does. And it can look like walking into a room and immediately sensing bad energy. It can feel like absolute dread in the pit of your stomach when you walk into a situation, you know that something's off. And it can also be like good gut instinct and like butterflies if like you meet someone, you're like so excited because it seems like a good connection. So, gut instinct is not always a bad thing. It can always be a good thing too. The second form of intuition is emotional. So picking up on others' emotions without them really saying anything. This is something that I have a really strong connection to. And feeling a strong emotional response to people, places, or situations before really understanding why. And oftentimes emotional intuition comes from growing up in an environment where you had to constantly gauge other people's emotions to determine if you were safe. So it is actually a survival instinct as well. And I think that's really important to note. The third one is intellectual intuition, which is instant knowing without needing logical proof or analysis. Or, I think about this is like when I was saying experts who recognize patterns subconsciously. So a doctor who diagnoses a condition before the test results can confirm it, or it's like a chess player that just knows exactly what to do to get into the mind of, their opponent. Intellectual intuition is usually done later in life when someone's really an expert in something, and it can be like kind of like the guy that can like prove the math problem without ever having to like prove it, which, dear Lord, my brain will never work that way. I'm amazed by that. But I do know like some intellectual intuition makes sense to me, because I remember like in math, I just like struggled with math up until I got to calculus. And then calculus like totally clicked for me because there's so much pattern recognition. Whereas before in like algebra, I was like, I don't get this. It makes no sense to me. But calculus, it was like everything clicked. So, I also think that maybe that might just be different types of intelligence. And then there is creative intuition, which is like spontaneous bursts of inspiration, ideas, or solutions. It's really common in artists, writers, inventors, and people that just tend to be problem solvers. So it's kind of like waking up with lyrics in your head or having a sudden vision or a business idea and just kind of knowing like, I need to run with this. So creative intuition is such a beautiful thing, and it can be really fleeting. There's spiritual intuition, which is higher knowing. So feeling guided by a force beyond yourself. such as a higher self, the universe, God, etc. And it's often associated with really deep insights, synchronicities, or signs. So it's repeated symbols, dreams, or messages that lead you toward a path you later realize was actually meant for you. I think about like some people are really symbolically driven. I have some people that say like, whenever I'm thinking about my mom, I see a crow or I see, this one thing. And, I think some people really are more in tune spiritually and can really connect to those things. And then my personal favorite is relational intuition, obviously, because I'm a therapist and everything is about the relationship. So it's instantly sensing the truth about people or relationships. And it's knowing when someone is lying, being inauthentic, or genuinely trustworthy. And, it's like meeting someone for the first time and feeling an unexplainable connection or total repulsion. And I have definitely experienced this in my life where I can tell if someone doesn't feel genuine or real, or I automatically just have like this gut feeling that like something is just not right here. Like something isn't connecting. I always get really nervous too with relational intuition. And I share this because I think a lot of people can relate to this, is that when I start to get really confused about what's going on with someone, or I can't figure it out, or, I'm getting curious, I'm asking questions, and I'm not really getting a lot of clarity, like to me, that's a sign that that might not be a safe person for me. And it's taken me a lot of years to really trust and lean into that and know that, because I never want to write another person off or believe that there's something wrong with them or that there's something unfixable. That is like the last thing I want to do. But also at the same time, we have to acknowledge, like, does that other person have capacity to change and do the work that is necessary to be in a healthy relationship? So it's like a two-part thing, obviously. And you might reflect and take some time to really think about for yourself too, like, where are the relationships where I felt really uneasy and I still gave time and energy to that person, and I actually wound up being really disrespected by that person? And you might consider that and think about that further. And I think, especially for women or people that identify as women, like, there are so many barriers to speaking up and saying how you feel and being honest, especially depending on like the community or background you come from. It can be really hard to trust that intuition and not just ignore that. And typically when we ignore that gut instinct, that intuition, whatever form we have, like, get into some trouble. It can cause a lot of pain. And I do think that pain is necessary in life. We do need to experience pain in life in order to grow and to heal and to become a higher version of who we are. But, it doesn't all have to be self-inflicted, right? We don't have to be the ones self-inflicting our own pain. So consider that too when you think about, should I listen to this? Should I not? So, just a reminder, here's some signs that your intuition is speaking to you. It's a deep knowing without logical explanation. There are physical sensations in the body. There's recurring thoughts, dreams, or symbols. And it can be a sense of excitement when something is right, or dread when it's not. And I want to share another example of how intuition can really show up in the therapy setting and what I can experience, so that I can give you another example of what that looks like. So when I am sitting with clients, I will often have an intuitive sense of what the emotional need is in that person. And a lot of that, like I've said, comes from my background, and it's something that I've had to develop throughout my life that I think I've been really honored and gifted that I get to use that now today. And I'm very humbled by it too. And I know, like, this is my nervous system directly interacting with that other person's nervous system. And if I don't listen to that intuition, might not be able to voice the distress that that client is experiencing. So that can look like when a client comes into the room and they're feeling dissociated, I will actually get dissociated with my client. My vision will get blurry and I'll struggle to focus on things in the room actually, which is like pretty wild when you think about it. And I can sense right off the bat that that dissociation is present, which means that therapy might be a really scary place for that person's body to be sitting in. And so we really gently approach the therapeutic process and practice building trust. And over time, that dissociation like slowly goes away, right? Because dissociation is our body's way of saying no. And if we can't feel like we can vocalize no, our body will find a way to say no, obviously. So, or it's not obvious actually, but it's obvious in my line of work. So, that's one thing to think about is how that shows up in the room. And maybe you might think about that too with other people. Are there people you interact with that make you feel crappy? That's interesting. Do they take your energy or do they give you energy? That's also interesting. So consider that. And some of the reasons we ignore our intuition can come from overthinking and logic bias. In our culture, we're very logic driven. If I want to see it to believe it, I need to know these concrete evidence. I want to see the KPIs. I want to do all these things, right, to know if this is the right choice. And yes, that has a place. That has a place in capitalism, consumerism. But when it comes to the body, it might not have a place all the time. Obviously we should be observers of our environment and make decisions informed by other people's actions and behaviors. But sometimes that overthinking can really damage our ability to live a life that feels fulfilled and say yes to opportunities that maybe don't add material value to our lives. Consider that. We also sometimes will ignore intuition because we fear that we could be wrong or make a mistake. And all I want to say is that if you're afraid of being wrong or making a mistake, you will never live your life fully. I'm going to say that again. If you have fear of being wrong or making a mistake, you will never live your life fully. Because sometimes in the mistakes and the pain and the heartache and the mistakes, oh my gosh, I'm saying mistakes a lot. Obviously, I really want you guys to make mistakes, clearly. But in those opportunities, we get to learn more about ourselves and grow. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Another thing that I think about, another barrier is external noise. So societal expectations, the opinions of others, like, oh man, I don't want to say no to this because I don't want to be rejected by this person. Or yeah, like if I don't say yes, then what will they think of me? Like, it doesn't matter. They're not in your body. What matters is what you need. Another thing I think about is past trauma or conditioning that can lead to self-doubt. And I just want to offer a lot of compassion if that's where you're sitting in today. And I hear you and I see you. And I want you to know you're not alone. And I think when it comes to past trauma, we can start to beat ourselves up that we're not where we should be. We might say, well, why can't I hear my intuition? Why can't I just be better? And I want to offer you compassion for that place. And if you want to reconnect to that intuition, it will require you to be compassionate towards yourself and to be slow and to be gentle and to be kind, right? We need to heal those past wounds to really move through that barrier that might be in place. We need to sit with a safe person and say, I'm afraid of hearing myself. I'm afraid of trusting myself. I'm afraid of what might happen if I make a mistake. And sit with someone you trust, with a therapist, with a mentor, with a really close friend, and look at what are the ways that I can heal this wounding. How can I heal this attachment to myself and to others? So here is my call to action for you. I want you to reflect on a time that you trusted or ignored your intuition and think about the outcome of that situation. Secondly, I want you to give a small change to the way that you do your week. So I want you to really tune into your intuition before making any small decision, and then reflect on how that feels in your body. And, I want you to do that and then share with one person how that went, right? Like, we don't have to do change in isolation. We can do change in community too. So think about, who are the people that I want to tell this exciting thing to? Who do I want to share this with? So, if you found this episode to be helpful, or you really resonated with it, or you even want to hear more, go ahead and screenshot this episode, share it on Instagram, tag me at the Self-Worth Renaissance. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. And please think about following this channel, downloading episodes. All of your likes and interactions just really help me continue to create content that is going to just increase in quality over time. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep raising your standards and know your worth.